I'm Eliza Matthews, 32 years old, and despite building a successful career in finance, I've never been good enough for my father. The annual family reunion dinner was approaching, and I dreaded it more than usual this year. I had bought him a luxury car as a peace offering, hoping things would be different. Little did I know that in my purse was a document that would change everything. By the end of the night, I would finally understand why my father never loved me. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever stood up to someone who refused to see your worth. Trust me, my story might give you the courage you need too. Growing up in an affluent Boston suburb, our family appeared picture-perfect to outsiders, but behind closed doors, things were very different. My father, Richard Matthews, built his real estate development company from moderate beginnings into a multi-million-dollar corporation. He valued success, status, and respect above all else, including family relationships. From my earliest memories, he was never the kind of father who attended school plays or helped with homework. Instead, he was the harsh critic who pointed out my B-plus grades should have been A's, who questioned why I wasn't chosen as team captain, who reminded me that second place was just the first loser. My mother, Caroline, was his opposite in many ways, warm and affectionate when he wasn't around, but she became a different person in his presence, almost shrinking into herself, never contradicting him, never standing up for us kids when his criticism went too far. It was a dynamic I didn't fully understand until I was much older, this strange power he held over her, the way her eyes would dart to him before she answered even simple questions about dinner plans or weekend activities. My siblings and I grew up within this complicated family structure. My older brother James was 3 years my senior and undeniably the golden child. He played football, made the honor roll, dated the right girls from the right families, and eventually followed our father into the real estate business after graduating from father's alma mater. Everything came easily to James, or at least that's how it appeared to me. He seemed to intuitively understand what would please our father, while I constantly guessed wrong. My younger sister Sophia, 2 years behind me, somehow managed to navigate the murky waters of our father's approval system better than I ever could. She wasn't the overachiever that James was, but she had a natural charm and an almost supernatural ability to read the room, to know when to speak and when to fade into the background. She became the family peacemaker, the one who could occasionally make father laugh when his mood darkened, the one who would slip into my room after particularly brutal criticism sessions to assure me that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But for me, nothing was ever enough. I graduated top of my class in high school, secured a full academic scholarship to Cornell, while father pushed for me to attend his alma mater instead, seeing my choice as a rejection of his legacy. During college, I worked 2 part-time jobs, while maintaining my GPA, yet during breaks he'd question why I wasn't interning at more prestigious companies. After graduation, I refused his half-hearted offer to work at his company, knowing I'd never be seen as anything but a pity hire. Instead, I moved to New York City, with nothing but 2 suitcases and determination, sleeping on a friend's couch while applying to every financial firm I could find. When I finally landed an entry-level position at Goldman Sachs, his response was, "Let's see if you last a month." I did last, not just a month, but 8 years, working my way up without family connections or nepotism, fueled partly by passion but also by a desperate need to prove him wrong. Just last month, I'd received a major promotion to senior investment strategist, becoming the youngest person in the firm's history to hold the position. The salary bump was substantial, allowing me to finally buy my dream apartment in Manhattan and still have savings left over. It was with those savings that I made what I thought would be a grand gesture, purchasing a brand new Mercedes S-Class for my father for Father's Day. In my fantasy, this gift would finally make him see me as successful, as worthy of his approval. The car cost nearly a year's salary, but I convinced myself it would be worth it to finally hear him say he was proud of me. Looking back now, I can see how pathetic that need for validation was, how it had shaped every major decision in my life. My achievements weren't truly for me, but were weapons in an unwinnable war for his affection. When I bought that car, I wasn't just buying a luxury vehicle, I was trying to buy what every child deserves freely, a parent's unconditional love. The annual Matthews family reunion always fell on the last weekend in June, conveniently close to Father's Day. which meant the gathering doubled as a celebration of Richard Matthews's patriarchal status. This year would be no different, except that I had made the decision to finally stand out by purchasing that ridiculously expensive luxury car, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class with all the premium features Father had once mentioned admiring at a country club friend's home. As the date approached, my anxiety spiraled to new heights. I spent 3 weekends shopping for the perfect outfit, something that screamed successful but not trying too hard, feminine but not frivolous, the contradictory mix my father seemed to expect from women in business. I settled on a navy blue, tailored dress from a designer my mother mentioned he respected, with subtle gold jewelry and shoes that were expensive but not flashy. The familiar pattern of preparation felt pathetic, even as I participated in it, the desperate routine of a child still seeking approval at 32. Past reunions flashed through my mind as I packed, each one marked by some form of paternal disappointment. When I was 16 and won the state math competition, he'd questioned why I wasn't focusing more on debate since numbers people are easy to find. When I graduated college summa cum laude, his only comment was that my chosen field was unstable compared to real estate. My first bonus at Goldman resulted in him wondering aloud if finance was really just glorified gambling, and my first promotion led to questions about whether I'd been selected to fill a gender quota. Nothing was ever an achievement on its own merits, always tainted by his skepticism. But this year carried an additional complication, one that had rocked the foundations of my identity just 3 months earlier. A popular genetic testing service, one I'd used out of simple curiosity about my ancestry, had revealed something unexpected. The genetic markers didn't align with being Richard Matthews's biological daughter. After the initial shock and disbelief, I'd quietly pursued a more definitive test, obtaining DNA samples from my father's hairbrush during a brief visit home. The results were conclusive and sat now in a sealed envelope in my purse, a nuclear option I hadn't decided whether to deploy. The discovery explained so much: the lifelong feeling of being an outsider in my own family, the subtle physical differences no one acknowledged, the inexplicable coldness from a man who showed at least basic affection to his other children. I suspected he knew, had always known, and that knowledge had colored every interaction we'd ever had. The day before the reunion, I drove the new Mercedes to my parents' suburban Boston home, having arranged for delivery to a nearby dealership. I'd planned the presentation carefully, arriving mid-afternoon when Mother would be at her garden club meeting, ensuring a private moment for this peace offering. My father answered the door in his usual crisp, business-casual attire, despite it being a Saturday, looking mildly annoyed at the interruption. "Eliza, you're early. The reunion isn't until tomorrow," he said, checking his watch as if I'd missed an appointment. "I know, Dad. I actually brought your Father's Day gift early and wanted to give it to you privately," I explained, heart pounding as I handed him a small box containing the car key with the Mercedes emblem clearly visible. He opened it with the polite, detached manner he reserved for obligatory gifts, his expression shifting to surprise as he recognized the logo. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, and I guided him to the front window, where the brand-new car sat gleaming in the driveway. His face registered genuine shock, followed by something almost like pleasure, but it faded quickly to his usual analytical expression. "This is excessive, Eliza. What are you trying to prove?" he asked, though he was already moving toward the front door, key in hand. "Nothing," I lied. "I got a big promotion, and I wanted to do something special for you." He circled the car, twice, examining it like he might a property investment, noting features, asking pointed questions about financing and insurance that felt more like an interrogation than gratitude. After a brief test drive where he commented on the steering being a bit loose despite the car's renowned handling, he parked it in the garage rather than leaving it in the driveway where guests might see it. His thanks were perfunctory, followed immediately by a comment that I must be doing well to waste money like this, effectively cutting the legs out from under my grand gesture. That evening, I called my best friend Taylor from my hotel room, fighting back tears as I recounted the cold reception. "You know what? Forget him," Taylor said with the righteous anger of a friend who'd heard too many similar stories. "Take the car back. He doesn't deserve it." I dismissed the suggestion, still clinging to hope that tomorrow would be different, that in front of others he might show appreciation, might finally see me. "Just promise me you won't show him that test," Taylor warned before hanging up. Not unless you're prepared for nuclear fallout. I promised, but the envelope remained in my purse, a secret weapon I both feared and couldn't quite relinquish. Sunday afternoon arrived with perfect June weather, sunny with a gentle breeze, as if the environment itself was conspiring to create the illusion of the perfect family gathering. I took the long route to my parents' estate, using the drive to rehearse confident responses to the inevitable questions about my personal life, my career trajectory, my lack of a husband or children at the ancient age of 32. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I turned onto the familiar maple-lined driveway, already half filled with luxury cars belonging to extended family and my father's business associates, who somehow always made the invite list for supposedly intimate family gatherings. I spotted the Mercedes I'd gifted him prominently displayed near the front entrance rather than in its garage spot from yesterday, strategically positioned where arriving guests couldn't miss it. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my dress, checked my makeup one final time, and strode toward the imposing front door with the practiced confidence I'd developed in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated me. Mother answered, her face lighting up with genuine warmth as she embraced me, whispering, "You look beautiful, darling," before adding her standard, "Your father's in the back garden with the Peterson group," as if issuing a weather warning. The grand foyer was already crowded with relatives, the usual mix of actual family and my father's carefully curated collection of connections who were treated as honorary members of the Matthews clan. Aunt Linda, mother's sister, approached, immediately with air kisses and rapid-fire questions about my love life, while Uncle George offered a hearty handshake and a booming, "There's our Wall Street wizard," which I knew would irritate my father if within earshot. Cousins, second cousins, and family friends swirled around in predictable patterns. The same conversations repeated annually with minor updates, everyone performing their assigned roles. In the Matthews family theater, my father's entrance was exactly as choreographed as I expected, walking in from the garden with 3 business associates, all laughing at something surely only moderately amusing but treated as hilarious due to the speaker's net worth. His eyes swept the room, acknowledging various guests with nods and brief greetings until landing on me. The flicker of recognition was followed by the briefest tightening of his lips before he nodded exactly as he had to distant relatives and walked toward Mother to murmur something in her ear. No particular greeting for me, his middle child, the daughter who had just gifted him an automobile worth more than most people's annual salaries. I pretended not to notice, engaged in conversation with my cousin Rachel about her medical residency, but the familiar sting of dismissal burned all the same. Mother materialized at my side moments later, touching my arm gently. "Darling, your father mentioned you brought a new car for him. How incredibly generous," she said, her eyes communicating a mixture of gratitude and concern about the extravagance. "Please come say hello to the Stevensons. They just got back from a financial conference in Singapore and would love your insights." This was Mother's way, always running interference, creating social buffers, manufacturing reasons for interactions that should come naturally between family members. James arrived fashionably late, as was his custom, making an entrance with his perfect wife Rebecca and their 2 perfect children, receiving the warm paternal embrace I'd spent decades trying to earn. "Dad, the new car is insane. When did you decide to upgrade?" he asked, and I watched in disbelief as my father clapped him on the shoulder and responded, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself, son. Success has its privileges," with no mention of the gift or my contribution. Sophia intercepted me before I could process this blatant erasure, pulling me into a genuine hug that lingered just long enough to communicate her understanding. "I heard about your promotion." "That's amazing, Liz. Seriously groundbreaking," she whispered, using my childhood nickname that no one else used anymore. Her sincerity was a balm, but the contrast with our father's indifference only highlighted the disparity. As appetizers circulated carried by hired staff, I noticed my father leading a group of his business associates toward the front drive, gesturing animatedly. Through the large bay windows, I could see him showing off the Mercedes, opening doors, pointing out features, his face alive with a pride I'd never seen directed at me. "He's been doing that all morning," Sophia murmured, appearing at my elbow, with a glass of wine that I gratefully accepted. 3 separate tours for different groups of his cronies. "Mother told me you bought it for him." That was incredibly generous, Liz. I sipped the wine, watching as my father settled into the driver's seat, inviting one of his associates to experience the passenger-side luxury. Generosity wasn't my motivation, I admitted quietly. Just once, I wanted him to see me as successful, as worthy of notice. Pathetic, right? Sophia squeezed my arm. Not pathetic. Human. But Liz, you need to understand. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Dad will never give you what you're looking for. It's not because you don't deserve it, but because he isn't capable of it. Something in him is broken when it comes to you specifically. Her words hit with surprising force, not because they were new information, but because hearing someone else acknowledge the dynamic I'd experienced my entire life made it suddenly painfully real in a way my private thoughts never had. The weight of the paternity test in my purse seemed to double, the sealed envelope a ticking bomb I both wanted to detonate and desperately hoped to contain. The hour before dinner unfolded with the predictable rhythm of Matthew's family gatherings, everyone migrating to the formal living room with its uncomfortable antique furniture and aggressively tasteful decor selected by Mother, but approved by Father in the only domestic domain where his opinion reigned supreme. I positioned myself strategically on a window seat, slightly removed from the main conversation circle, nursing a second glass of wine and observing the familiar family dynamics. With newfound clarity, the knowledge of my genetic otherness creating an almost anthropological detachment, James naturally commanded the center of attention, regaling the assembled family with tales of his latest real estate acquisition, a struggling shopping complex he planned to transform into luxury condominiums. The initial investment looked risky to my partners, but I saw the potential everyone else missed, he explained, with our father nodding approvingly from his leather armchair throne. That's the Matthews instinct, Father interjected proudly. Seeing opportunity where others see failure. It's in the blood. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, the phantom weight of the envelope in my purse growing heavier with each blood-related claim. The conversation shifted inevitably in my direction as James concluded his self-congratulatory monologue. Eliza, Richard tells me you've moved up at your firm, my Uncle Robert remarked, genuine interest in his voice. Senior investment strategist, isn't it? Impressive for someone your age. Before I could respond, Father cleared his throat. It's a good stepping stone position. The financial sector is volatile, though, always has been. Not like having something tangible like property. He turned toward James. Real assets withstand market fluctuations. They persist through generations. The familiar dismissal stung despite my anticipation of it, the calculated pivot back to James and real estate, the implied inferiority of my chosen career path. Actually, I began, summoning the professional voice I used in difficult client meetings, my division generated 38% returns last quarter, outperforming the market by 22 points during significant volatility. Our risk assessment model, which I developed, has been adopted company-wide. A moment of impressed silence followed before Father responded with a dismissive wave. Numbers on paper. When the next recession hits, we'll see how that holds up. He turned to his business associate. Henry, speaking of property values, what do you think of the zoning changes in the Cambridge corridor? I excused myself to refresh my drink, encountering Sophia in the hallway as she returned from checking on her husband, who was watching the children in the backyard. Don't let him get to you, she whispered, squeezing my arm. I heard about your model from Michael's cousin who works in finance. It's apparently revolutionary. Her validation warmed me even as I realized how pathetic it was to still crave such approval. As I approached the bar setup in the dining room, I overheard Father's voice drifting from his adjoining study, the door slightly ajar. The car? Yes. Quite an upgrade from the old model. When you work hard and build something from nothing like I have, you earn these luxuries. The male voice responding belonged to Walter Peterson, Father's longtime business rival and sometimes ally. Richard, you old dog, always the modest one. Your daughter Eliza mentioned she bought it for you when we chatted earlier. Said something. About her promotion. Sounds like she's making quite a name for herself in New York. A brief silence followed before Father's response, each word precisely chosen. Yes, well, the girl has always been desperate for attention. Truth is, her success comes from the opportunities I provided. Private schools, college connections, the fundamental understanding of business I instilled in all my children. The car is just her way of showing she's finally applying what I taught her. The casual erasure of my accomplishments, the rewriting of my hard-fought independence as somehow stemming from his influence when he'd offered nothing but criticism, sent a shock of anger through me so intense I nearly dropped my glass. The conversation continued, Father describing how he'd always pushed Eliza harder than the others because she needed that extra discipline, painting himself as the architect of achievements he'd actively dismissed. I retreated before being discovered, anger churning into a cold, clarifying fury. In the main hallway, James intercepted me, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Eliza, a word? He guided me toward a quiet corner near Mother's prized orchid display. Dad mentioned you've been asking Mother strange questions about her college years. What exactly are you digging for? His directness caught me off guard. In truth, after the DNA test, I had casually inquired about Mother's life before marriage, fishing for clues about possible relationships. But I'd thought my questions sufficiently subtle. Just getting to know her better, I replied carefully. Women in her generation didn't get many opportunities to build their own identities before marriage and children. James studied me with our father's analytical gaze, the family resemblance, striking in ways that now felt like further evidence of my exclusion. Look, whatever you're doing, whatever point you're trying to make with extravagant gifts and probing questions, just stop. The family has a certain order, a harmony. Don't disrupt that with whatever crisis you're manufacturing. His condescension was so perfectly echoed from Father that I almost laughed. Harmony? Is that what you call this toxic hierarchy? This system where one person's accomplishments are celebrated while another's are undermined? I'm not manufacturing anything, James. I'm just finally seeing clearly. He stepped closer, voice lowered to avoid attention. Dad has built everything we have. The Matthews name means something because of him. Your fancy job in New York, your trendy apartment, it all stems from the foundation he created. Show some respect and gratitude for once. Before I could respond, our cousin Rachel approached, seeming to sense the tension. Everything okay over here? Aunt Caroline is looking for both of you. I think dinner is about to be announced. James plastered on his public smile, the perfect son persona slipping seamlessly back into place. Just catching up with my little sister. Business talk, nothing important. As he walked away, Rachel touched my arm gently. You know, my mom always says your father plays favorites like it's an Olympic sport he's determined to medal in. For what it's worth, I think what you've accomplished on your own is pretty incredible. Her quiet support nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. I'd spent so many years convincing myself that the problem was my perception, not reality, that having someone else acknowledge the dynamic felt paradoxically both validating and devastating. The dinner bell chimed, Mother's signal for everyone to begin moving toward the formal dining room. I lingered behind, fingers brushing the outline of the envelope in my purse, weighing options, consequences, scenarios. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to withdraw from this charade of family unity, to protect myself from the inevitable wounds the evening would inflict. But a stronger, perhaps more masochistic part refused to retreat, determined to see this through, to finally confront the lifetime of rejection with the physical evidence of its root cause. I checked the envelope one final time, confirming the test results remained safely sealed inside, then straightened my shoulders and moved toward the dining room, steeling myself for the performance ahead. The Matthews formal dining room had always struck me as a perfect metaphor for our family, with its imposing mahogany table that seated 20 people yet somehow still felt coldly impersonal. The ancestral portraits watching judgmentally from walls and the elaborate place settings that prioritized appearance over comfort, just like everything else in my father's carefully constructed world. Mother had outdone herself with the table arrangements, crystal glasses catching light from the chandelier, fresh flower centerpieces spaced precisely, name cards in perfect calligraphy assigning each guest their predetermined position in the family hierarchy. I found my card predictably far down the table, seated between Cousin Rachel's husband, whom I'd met perhaps twice, and one of Father's younger business associates, safely distanced from any meaningful conversation. James and his family occupied the prime positions near Father at the head of the table, with Sophia and her husband serving as buffers between the inner circle and lesser relations. Mother sat at the opposite end, her position a perfect illustration of her role in the family, technically equal but separated by the expanse of the table, connected yet distant. The first course arrived with military precision, waitstaff placing, delicate appetizers of seared scallops with microgreens before each guest simultaneously. Father rose, wineglass in hand, commanding immediate silence without requiring a word. "Welcome, family and friends, to our annual reunion," he began with practiced charm, his public persona polished to a glossy shine. "Each year, I'm reminded how fortunate I am to have built not just a successful business, but a legacy embodied by my family." His gaze swept proudly over James, who nodded appreciatively, then Sophia, who smiled demurely, before sliding past me as if I occupied the same visual plane as the wallpaper. "A special welcome to the Peterson Group joining us this year," he continued, acknowledging his business associates. "When surrounded by success, one naturally attracts more of the same." The toast continued with Father highlighting James's recent business expansion, Sophia's community board appointment, and ending with a pointed comment that family success comes from embracing proven pathways rather than unnecessarily challenging traditions, his eyes finally landing briefly on me with unmistakable meaning. As the meal progressed through 5 elaborate courses, Father directed conversation with subtle cues and direct questions, ensuring topics remained within his preferred domains of real estate markets, local politics where he held influence, and occasional sports discussions that inevitably highlighted James's former athletic achievements. When Mother gently attempted to mention my recent promotion during a lull, Father smoothly intercepted. "Speaking of financial markets, Henry, what's your take on the Fed's latest signals?" Effectively erasing her effort without acknowledging it had occurred. By the fish course, the familiar pattern had fully emerged, with Father periodically lobbing pointed questions in my direction, each designed to undermine rather than engage. "Eliza, your firm handles primarily domestic investments, correct? Limiting, isn't it, given the global expansion opportunities? Or, I understand your promotion came after the Davidson account. Fortunate timing that James was able to introduce you to William Davidson at last year's charity gala." Each comment carefully constructed to reframe any success as either limited in scope or dependent on family connections I had actively avoided using. I maintained the pleasant, professional demeanor I'd perfected in hostile boardrooms, refusing to show the emotional reaction he seemed determined to provoke. "Actually, Father, our international division integrated my risk assessment model last quarter, and the Davidson account came through a blind pitch competition, no introductions involved. My corrections were delivered with practiced lightness, though I noticed Sophia's sympathetic wince at each exchange, the familiar family dance painful in its predictability. The main course arrived, an unnecessarily elaborate beef Wellington that required all attention for several minutes, providing brief respite from the conversational minefield. Father used the opportunity to open another bottle of prohibitively expensive wine, his consumption steadily increasing throughout the meal, a concerning pattern that Mother tracked with nervous glances. James leaned over to mutter something in Father's ear, receiving a dismissive wave in response. As coffee and dessert were served, Father's attention swung back in my direction, alcohol having eroded what minimal filters he typically maintained. "Eliza, Richard tells me you're still single," commented Mrs. Peterson with well-meaning interest. "Such a beautiful, accomplished young woman. The men in New York must be intimidated." Before I could formulate a polite response about prioritizing career advancement, Father interjected. "Eliza has always been focused on proving something rather than building something," he said, swirling his bourbon contemplatively. "Some people chase accomplishments to fill other voids. Family requires compromise, something the Matthews women have traditionally understood better than she has." The casual cruelty landed with practiced precision, implying my professional success was compensation for personal failure rather than an achievement in its own right. Mother's sharp intake of breath was audible even from my distant table position. "Richard," she began with uncharacteristic firmness, but he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Perhaps if Eliza had shown more interest in suitable matches I introduced over the years rather than dismissing them as boring or conventional, she wouldn't be facing her 30s alone." Each word was carefully selected for maximum impact, The public dissection of my personal choices presented as paternal concern rather than the hostile critique it truly was. The familiar pressure built behind my eyes. The childhood urge to flee from the table, fighting against adult determination to maintain dignity. I took a measured sip of water, noting with detached interest that my hand remained steady despite the emotional turbulence beneath. I appreciate your concern for my personal fulfillment, Father, I responded evenly, drawing on every negotiation technique I'd ever learned. But as you've often emphasized, Matthew's focus on results, and my results speak for themselves. A tense silence fell over the table, relatives who had witnessed similar exchanges over the years studiously examining their dessert plates while Father's business associates shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in the architectural details of the ceiling. The pressure in my chest expanded with each heartbeat, the culmination of a lifetime of these moments, these public humiliations thinly disguised as family concern, these careful erasures of my personhood and achievements. The envelope in my purse seemed to pulse with potential energy, a nuclear option I had promised myself and Taylor I wouldn't deploy. As waitstaff cleared dessert plates, I realized with perfect clarity that the current path was unsustainable, that continuing to seek approval from a man genetically programmed to withhold it was a form of self-destruction I could no longer afford. As coffee cups were being refilled and brandy offered to conclude the elaborate meal, Father pushed his chair back slightly, a signal universally understood by the gathered family as preparation for one of his impromptu speeches, a tradition that had evolved over years of Matthew's gatherings. The anticipatory silence fell immediately, conversations halting mid-sentence, silverware carefully placed down, all attention reflexively turning toward the patriarch. Father stood, brandy snifter in hand, his expression taking on the benevolent authority he reserved for these moments of public performance. "Before we disperse to the garden for our annual family photograph," he began, voice carrying that particular timbre of someone accustomed to commanding rooms, "I'd like to take a moment to express my pride in what the Matthews family continues to build together." He gestured expansively, including the business associates as honorary members of this supposed dynasty. A family is much like a business, enterprise, requiring vision, leadership, and participants who understand their roles